Hello and welcome to Newsline Live. I'm Aditya Kaul. It's been exactly a year since the barbaric terror attack that took place in southern Israel, where more than 1,500 innocent were killed, were in fact lynched, and there were many rapes and crimes against women that were reported by the Hamas against the Jewish community and several other nationalities that were there in different kibbutz and other places. It's been a year, but now it's not just an escalation in the southern part, but also in the northern borders of Israel, where a confrontation with Lebanon is underway. It is, in fact, the proxies of Iran that have been attacking Israel continuously. But what's been happening now on ground? What is the future strategy? And could we see an end to this escalation of the war? Joining me is Israel's new ambassador to India, Ambassador Reuven Azar. Thank you very much for joining us, Ambassador. Let me begin by asking you about this new confrontation that's been underway. Over the last 3 days, we've seen escalation. We've seen almost in a span of 24 hours, 600 people or so being killed in Lebanon, in Beirut and other places. And of course, we heard about the pager blasts, the walkie-talkies going off suddenly. Nobody knows who did this and why it happened. What exactly is in Israel's mind? Why this significant escalation suddenly on the northern border of Israel?
Well, Aditya, thank you very much for this interview. For many people that weren't following what was happening in the north, this is like a surprise. But for us, it's not at all a surprise, because for the last 11 months, since the 8th of October, in which we were attacked in a completely unprovoked way by Hezbollah, there has been exchange of fire in the north. And this caused a lot of suffering in Israel. We had to evacuate about 70,000 people from their homes, and they cannot go back because on the other side of the border you have Hezbollah terrorists that are firing direct fire against them. So we postponed our dealing with that because our army was stretched thin. We had to deal, first of all, with the threat in the Gaza Strip, which we did, and the majority of the threat of Hamas was neutralized. No longer we have a threat of missiles to be fired against Israel. Their factories of missiles were destroyed, and many other installations that won't go into details. But the bottom line is that now we have the attention span to try and solve the problem in the north. We've been trying to actually solve it diplomatically with the help of our American friends, but Hezbollah has been refusing to restore calm and to implement the UN Security Council Resolution 1701 that states clearly that they have to withdraw north to the Litani River, which is a few kilometers to the north of the border. So as long as they don't do that, we are being forced to use pressure, military pressure, until they agree to implement what is internationally recognized as the prerequisite for stability.
Could we say that these are preemptive strikes? Because, we've seen for over a year or perhaps 10 months what's been happening in Gaza, and the situation seems to be relatively calm. There are no attacks or, rocket attacks happening from Gaza. The supply chain of Hamas seems to be impacted as of now, and perhaps you found an opportunity there to do these, preemptive strikes in Lebanon, because, of course, there were rumors or speculations about Iran launching a direct attack. So were these preemptive strikes?
No, because as I told you, a preemptive strike is when you strike your enemy before they start shooting at you. But as I told you, for 11 months, Hezbollah has been firing about 10,000 rounds of both rockets and missiles, drones, anti-tank missiles. And this is causing terrible damage on our border. As I said, we had the right to defend ourselves then, but we had a different priority. The people of the north, however, they are very frustrated, and they are demanding from the government to solve the situation. So finally, when we have the attention span, and we can get forces from the Gaza Strip to deal with the problem in the north, then the government, the Israeli cabinet, decided to adopt a resolution to bring back our citizens back to their homes, and the means of doing that, if they fail diplomatically as they've been so far, will be through military means. And this is why you have seen a series of attacks. We have targeted militarily only military targets. In the last 72 hours, we have hit about 2,000 military targets, mainly in the south, in villages and houses that embedded, that concealed illegally missiles. So before doing that, we called all the population to evacuate. So indeed, there have been some casualties there, but compared to the number of targets, and thanks to the warnings that we sent to the population, the majority of the population was able to evacuate. And the reports we are hearing now from Lebanon is that about 500,000 people have left these villages to the Beirut area.
You know, the other day, just a few days ago, I was going to interview the former chief of staff of the Northern Command of the IDF, because I had met him a few months back in Israel. And just when the interview was about to happen, he said that I've been called and summoned by the national security apparatus and I have to go.
Yeah.
Are we looking at a situation of a ground invasion? And maybe I should ask not if, but when?
Well, first of all, there's a saying, Aditya, that whoever wants to achieve peace has to be prepared for war. Okay? So we want to achieve peace and stability. We would prefer that peace and stability wouldn't be breached by Hezbollah. But once it was done, we have to be prepared always with a series of steps that will make clear to the aggressor that he will be paying an increasing price for their crimes. And therefore, yes, we are preparing a ground invasion. And it has to be very clear to Hezbollah that if they don't stop now, after we have given them a serious blow, the blow that is going to come after that is much higher. So we are working incrementally because we don't want to use more force than is required. And we don't want to sacrifice our soldiers or our citizens just for the sake of doing war. No, we are in the business of achieving stability and peace because this is how democracies live and thrive, not through war. But when aggression and war are imposed on us, we have to be able and capable to give an answer and make it clear that this shouldn't be happening in the future. So we are concentrated in achieving this goal of getting Hezbollah out of our border, because then our citizens will be feeling safe to come back to their home.
Of course, it's important to rehabilitate those citizens who have left the northern areas of Israel. But, you know, a few days ago, we heard these reports of pagers going off, the walkie-talkies going off, in some cases, solar panels going off, cars catching fire. It was told that more than 5,000 such explosions took place. Thousands were injured. Perhaps some killings took place. The Hezbollah admitted 20 to 40 people died. But there was some intelligence reports that was doing rounds that 800 to 900 Hezbollah terrorists have been killed. Who did this? Iran and Hezbollah blame the Mossad. Would you love to take the credit for this?
No.
But any comments? Who did this? Why it did happen? Why this happened at this particular time, even before the airstrikes were launched by Israel?
Well, whoever deals with terrorism has to take into account that their life is in danger. And I'm not going to comment on who did it or didn't do it. We are not taking any credit for anything. But we have to face a situation that we are challenged, because in this hybrid war that we are fighting, that is actually was imposed on us, it is very difficult to fight when you are having the other side using really inhumane tactics, that is breaching every rule in the book of laws. They conceal missiles in homes, in civilian homes, and they fire from civilian villages indiscriminately at Israeli civilians. So it's a double war crime. Okay? And this is only one of the tactics that we have been seeing in the past year. We've seen terrible things being done by Hamas. You mentioned some of them, the atrocious attacks, beheadings, using their own people as human shields in hospitals, in schools, stealing and abusing the same international organizations that are trying to help them. So this is a terrible thing to do. And when you are part of a country that is a democracy and you already put one hand behind your back while fighting because you don't want to adopt the same tactics that they do, you have to think outside the box. You have to try to create a situation in which you manage to surprise the terrorists, because otherwise it will be very difficult to deter them. Unlike states, that have conventional armies and they care about their population. They care about their assets. Hezbollah doesn't care about the Lebanese population. They don't care about their own population. They don't care about their infrastructure. So it's very difficult to deter them in that way, and you have to find a way to send a message that will deter them in the future. And we managed to create quiet in our border for almost 18 years, since the Second Lebanon War.
Right.
But this is not enough, apparently, because they breached that ceasefire, and they attacked us again. So we have to defend ourselves, and we have to find creative ways of defending ourselves.
Well, Ambassador, moving on to Hamas, it's been almost a year now of the barbaric carnage that we saw in southern Israel, and not just as a diplomat. I ask you this as a former Deputy National Security Advisor who has worked with the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, and others, members of the Security Cabinet. Is a hostage deal really a possibility at this stage? Because the protesters who come every weekend in Tel Aviv seem to disagree with the government, and they're protesting against the government, and they're saying that a hostage deal should be done because there are perhaps 60 to 80 hostages who perhaps are still alive. Nobody knows the perfect detail, but certainly the protesters seem to believe that not enough is being done for a hostage deal to be arrived at. After Ismail Haniyeh's killing, and perhaps now there are rumors of Sinwar's killing as well, is a hostage deal really a possibility?
Well, so first of all, Aditya, the plight of the families is very natural, and we don't have any argument with them, because this is something very natural, very humane. And not only that, we have the duty as the state to bring our citizens and soldiers back home. Okay? Now, what is the dilemma here? What is the challenge? We managed, as you remember, to bring back about 150 hostages, and this was done mainly through negotiation. But as we advance with the negotiation, Hamas understands that if they do another deal with us, this won't stop Israel from continue fighting them. And what they want to achieve with the hostages, they try to extort Israel to surrender and to allow them to rearm and regroup so they can do again this attack. So this is something that, from a national security point of view, we cannot allow. And hence, you have the dilemma. So you have this path that was defined by President Biden, was supported by the UN Security Council, and we support it as well. And we said, okay, let's do it in stages. But Hamas is refusing to do it. So we will not allow a situation that the release of the hostages will be a menu for other 7 of Octobers. And that's why the Prime Minister was very stubborn, for example, on maintaining the Philadelphia corridor, the border between Gaza and the Sinai, because that was the conduit through which most of the contraband was happening. So we don't want Hamas to rearm and regroup. We have to be very clear about that. So yes, there are demonstrations, we are a democracy, there are pressures, there will always be pressures. And I don't envy our decision makers. They have to make tough decisions. And tough decisions will be made.
Ambassador, after Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh was killed, again something that you have not taken credit for, Iran pledged a direct attack on Israel, but it hasn't happened. Earlier when we saw this, I think it was 13th of April or around that time, we saw 300 to 400 of those rockets, but it turned out to be a damn squib. Why do you think that Iran has waited this long? Is it because of the diplomacy happening from US and other countries? Or do you think that Iran is still waiting for the right time?
Well, the truth is, I don't know, Aditya. I think that it's very hard to enter into the minds of our enemies. We have to be modest when it comes to, assessing the situation. But I think that I would think about 2 main reasons. First is the way that we decided to retaliate. Because if you remember, we didn't retaliate massively, but we did something very surgical. And that thing that we did very surgically gave an idea to the Iranians of what are our capabilities. So it's a combination of our military capabilities, which we've shown in different ways throughout this year, and of course the diplomatic pressures.
When you speak about the precision strike, are you talking about S-400 or are you talking about Ismail Haniyeh?
No, I'm talking about certain installations that Iranians had that we took out. So I think that the combination of the two maybe is postponing their decision. But I don't know. Eventually, we'll have to wait and see. It's a combination of things. You know, it's very difficult. What I learned in the process of being part of a decision-making process in Israel is that sometimes it's very hard to put yourself in the shoes of the decision maker, and you can do all kinds of, estimations or have different opinions. But at the end of the day, you never know the complete picture, and therefore you have to be modest about it.
Well, Ambassador, immediately after the 7th October terror attacks last year, we often heard the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, speak about a new reality to be created in Gaza. He spoke in October, in November, and since then repeatedly that we will not stop before Hamas is completely eradicated from Gaza and a new reality will be created. Are you on that right path of the military or the diplomatic objectives that you have in Gaza? And once the Hamas has completely been eradicated, if that is indeed a reality, what would be this new reality? Who will govern Gaza? What will be the future of the people really? Because last time you had handed it over, but this time would it be as peaceful a transition?
Well, first of all, we have to learn from the past. And as you rightly said, we evacuated Gaza completely in 2005, unilaterally. And then a year and a half after that, Hamas took over. And since Hamas took over, it has been indoctrinating the population in the Gaza Strip, including kids from the age of 2 years, to dedicate their lives to killing Jews and Israelis. Okay? So by taking Hamas out of power, first of all, militarily, we neutralize the threat, but the question is whether we are going to be able to take them out of power in the Gaza Strip. And that's a tougher task. I think we are on the right path because Hamas is gradually losing control. There is a debate in Israel right now about who is going to control the humanitarian assistance. But if there's something that we are completely convinced is that in order to de-radicalize the Gaza Strip, Hamas can no longer rule there, and nobody will come to replace Hamas if the Palestinians themselves or the people that are coming to work there will fear Hamas. So this is a long-term effort. It's not going to happen in a month or maybe not even in a year. So we will have to combine our military presence with effort of the international community together with us to remove the Hamas rule and encourage a more pragmatic leadership that will be capable of reconstructing Gaza in a more positive way, in a way that will include elements of de-radicalization.
In the recent months, we've also seen a lot of criticism happening of the United Nations. Of course, there is a subgroup of the UN, the UNRWA, which has been criticized by Israel for, in fact, having Hamas terrorists as part of them, using the aid that is coming in for Hamas activity, etc. But overall, what do you think is the role of the United Nations as of now, which has been criticized for not only being completely failed in combating terrorism, but also not resolving conflicts? Do you also feel, Ambassador, that this is the time for reforms at the United Nations, that there is a hegemony of the few, there is a propaganda of the few, and with the times, the UN needs to change as well, particularly the UN Security Council?
Well, look, the UN Security Council, I think, is one of the more efficient bodies of the UN because it has enforcing power and because the deliberations there are within a smaller group of countries, and the presence of the United States there, which is our main ally, I think is a prerequisite for keeping our interests in that forum. And therefore, our cooperation and coordination with the United States is crucial. But when it comes to the larger situation in the UN, it is very problematic because of several reasons. First of all, as you rightly said, there is a dynamic that is being created by the fact that the UN system works in groups and that there is a very big group of Arab and Islamic states that most of them are actually automatically supporting anything that the Palestinians come up with. And this is creating a distortion in the voting And it is creating a distortion in the nomination of the people that are in charge of dealing with our conflict, whether it be rapporteurs or any other thing that is happening. Even worse than that is the existence of this agency called UNRWA, because of two reasons. The first is UNRWA was created in the first place in order to perpetuate the conflict. It's basically disregarding completely the refugees, the Jewish refugees that fled from Arab countries, 800,000, came to the state of Israel. They don't care about them. Their story is not interesting. But they are investing billions of dollars in perpetuating the plea of the Palestinians that fled Israel in 1948. And this is being done within their education system. So they educate every child that is being born in the West Bank or Gaza that they have to go back and they have to destroy the state of Israel. This is completely unacceptable. And it's done by a UN agency. Okay? Now, the consequence of that is that out of the 13,000 workers of UNRWA in the Gaza Strip, according to our intelligence, at least 2,000 of them are either terrorists or members in terrorist organizations. And we supplied information and evidence to the UN and to the OIOS committee regarding that. And Ms. Colonna actually mentioned this problematic. So UNRWA just did some cosmetics, maybe fired a few people, and that's it. But the entire organization is compromised. The intelligence apparatus of Hamas was built under the main headquarters of UNRWA in the Gaza Strip. The Union of Workers of UNRWA is led by Hamas people. So UNRWA and Hamas, when it comes, for example, to the humanitarian effort, have become one. It's inseparable. Right. And that's why we talked with other countries and we told them, you have to divert your assistance from UNRWA to other UN agencies. We need the UN. Israel appreciates the UN. We would like the UN to be a honest stakeholder. Unfortunately, that's not the situation. Even though it is not that situation, we are working with the UN. But UNRWA is something that has to vanish from the world. If we want peace, if we want a cease to the compromise of UN agencies to the will of terrorist organizations. Some countries understand that. The United States has freezed the assistance to UNRWA. We are asking, and we asked also India to consider that, because at the end of the day, we have to be in a situation in which the needy people receive assistance, but this doesn't serve the terrorists.
Well, fair enough. Moving on from UN and from West Asia to New Delhi, where we are right now. Prime Minister Modi has often spoken about the closeness that India and Israel have. They share a good bond, Prime Minister Netanyahu and Prime Minister Modi. They've also spoken about the strategic partnership and has openly in the last 1 year condemned terrorism, terror attacks on Israel. How would you describe the current bilateral strategic partnership between India and Israel?
Well, first of all, we appreciate very much the position of India, the very straightforward condemnation of the 7th of October and the support for Israel's right to self-defense, and also the voting last week not to support this UNGA resolution that was completely outrageous. Okay? Now, besides that, as you know, we have a very solid relationship that is based on several pillars, whether it be, first of all, it's based on values, okay? On values of democracy, of human rights, of tolerance, of pragmatism. But practically, when it comes to the content, we have great relations when it comes to the defense field, in the water, agriculture and food security, in innovation. We want to introduce now also cooperation on infrastructure. We want Indian companies to come and build infrastructure projects in Israel. And, above all, the fact that India is rising to become a global power, an economic power, is something very positive, because India is going to be an essential element in the world chain of supply. And that is something that is gaining a lot of attention nowadays, because countries want to be in a situation, especially when you have this tension increasing between China and the United States, that their chain of supplies will be secure. In order to secure a chain of supply, you need a big market. And India is a big market. So many Israeli companies are now looking at this, and especially highly advanced technological companies want not only to cooperate with Indian companies in developing technology, but also they want to commercialize their solution and manufacture their products on Indian soil. So this is something that we are dealing with on a daily basis. Our economic department and the different chambers of commerce are dealing with that. We are looking for ways to ease this entrance of the companies here by removing, bureaucracy, by creating financial tools that we need in order for them to easily move capital. So all these things are things that we are talking about with the Indian government.
Well, we also had in the last 1 year, ever since the war, close to 20,000 or maybe more Indian skilled workers as well as caregivers go to Israel. I'm told that the numbers could go up to 50,000 or even a lakh. How significant is this? I haven't seen in the past that in such big numbers, Indians actually moving to Israel.
Yeah, so right now the number is about 10,000. And we, as you said, we are interested in increasing the number. And there are several ways of doing it. There are some, at the beginning you have different things that you have to adapt in order for the things to work well. But I believe that we already have established two main channels, the governmental channel, the private sector channel. And as I said before, we want to introduce also the infrastructure channel, because if an Indian company comes to build a metro in Israel, for example, they will bring their skilled workers. So this is a potential for great growth in that market, and there's a common interest here to pursue it.
Israel has often provided sophisticated weapons, ammunition to India. We've also seen history being testimony to it. The Kargil War in 1999, where Israel was of immense help to India. We also saw in the Pulwama terror attack that took place in India in 2019, and after that India hit Pakistan in Balakot. Again, Israeli spice bombs were used in that. But the both countries do not speak much about their defense ties, technology sharing, etc. Firstly, there are speculation about India providing some either weapons or some parts or some raw materials to Israel. This was written, in fact, by a former Israeli diplomat, Daniel Carmon, in a local newspaper. So, would you reveal any such details of help coming in from India? And secondly, the more broader question: how are the defense strategic ties? How is the technology sharing happening right now? Could you share some details?
Well, first of all, you are right that sometimes the defense world and the foreign policy world aren't connected, and we were having for many years this kind of disconnect with many countries. But as technology advances, people are getting to the conclusion that everything is connected, and at the end of the day, Israel is becoming an indispensable player when it comes to solutions, not only in the defense field, but also in the emerging technologies and innovation. And therefore, this alliance with India is very natural. Okay, India is a country that is building its power, and we are not competing with it, we are just complementing it. So when it comes to cooperation in defense, I think that the bottom line is that we had a challenge to adapt to the new policy of India, Make in India, because in the past we used to export a lot of finished products, but now it has become more nuanced and complicated. We are working with India to produce in India through very big numbers of subsidiaries with different participation percentage when it comes to the ownership of companies, with the aim to continue being this complementary element that is in the mutual interest, especially when you want to compete in third countries. Because if you just want to supply to the Indian market, okay, that's okay. But at the end of the day, you have to compete twice. First of all, you have to compete so your weapons are more sophisticated than the weapons of the enemy. The second time you have to compete is in the commercial defense market. So if you want just to supply to yourself, okay, but if you want to start becoming an exporter, then I think it becomes more nuanced, and you have to pick and choose. What is the IP you're going to produce yourself, and what is the IP that you're going to borrow from other countries? And here Israel is prepared to do that extra mile. Okay? Now, when it comes to other aspects, it's the same. Emerging technologies is something that everybody wants to have. We have a joint fund of research between Israel and India. It's not very big, and we have to measure how efficient it is. I've asked for this information immediately after I came. I think it is very, very useful for both countries, and you have to have private sector players that will play a role in that process as well. So if I have to sum it up, this relationship that includes cooperation in research and development, leaning on supply chains, both in defense and in commercial, investments, commercialization, and manufacturing. All these things are necessary in order to foment this relationship that is very important to both sides.
And the first question about India, reports about India helping out Israel?
Well, I don't have reports regarding specific things that are coming and going. Defense cooperation naturally is something that is usually kept in close quarters, so why to change that?
And since the defense and technology partnership is so strong, could we expect, Ambassador, that a joint military exercise between India and Israel, of course there is intelligence sharing that happens at a gradual level, but for instance we have very important exchanges that happen with US, with Australia, with Japan and several other countries. Why not something incredible between India and Israel, the IDF and the Indian Army perhaps?
Well, when it comes to military cooperation, there are many facets of it, and you mentioned two of them, but actually there are many more.
Sure.
So intelligence sharing is one thing, doing joint drills is another thing. What about sharing lessons from recent confrontations? Mm-hmm. This is something very important. Okay? What about visits? What about technological cooperation? What about sharing solutions to different challenges? There are many, many ways that you can cooperate militarily, and I'm sure that those that are in charge are creative enough to, untap the potential of all.
Fair enough. You were recently at the Semicon that happened in India. On semiconductors, India is trying to build a potential over the last 2 to 3 years. Something was announced recently when Prime Minister Modi visited US as well. Is there a semiconductor investment plan, something that you want to reveal that Israel and India might partner together?
Well, there are several partnerships that are being built. Because of commercial reasons, we cannot go into details. But at the end of the day, what I was told that India would need is actually all the range of solutions. It's not just doing the top-notch digital semiconductors. For example, analog semiconductors is also something that India needs. Okay, the range of investments that a power like India needs in order to actually become this powerhouse of manufacturing and technology has a huge span. So we are engaging in all types of things, and I hope to hear good news in the coming weeks.
Well, we'll wait for that. Both India and Israel have been victims of terrorism for a very long time, and often India has taken steps in the recent years in the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. We see elections also happening right now. The 2 phases are over. The 3rd phase is about to happen, and we'll have results by the 2nd week of October. How do you see India's steps that India has taken to restore democracy completely and show intolerance towards any kind of aggression and terrorism in the recent years, in the past as well, and given a very strong perception or a narrative against terrorism completely?
Well, we have a lot of things in common when it comes to challenges, but when it comes to solutions, you have to look at every scenario and see what solutions are applicable. Because, we are looking with great admiration how comprehensive the effort of India is in order to stabilize regions like the one you mentioned. Because it's not only just using military might, it's also using soft power, using media, using education. It's something that you own and you have the means to deal with. Our situation in the Middle East is a bit different because we are a small country that is living in an ocean of radicalism. We have neighbors that are numerous, that have a lot of population. So our capability to influence what is happening on the other side of the border is very limited. And to tell you the truth, we have very bad experience with trying to do that. Okay? So we have to live with the consequences of the developments that are happening around us, and that's why, using soft power is very important. Maybe we don't have a very good record with it, but at the end of the day, the degree of investment we have to do there is such that it's almost impossible to get a result from. So we are opting for another tactic, and that's creating partnerships. So as you know, we've been able to do peace with Egypt and Jordan, and we've been able to sign the Abraham Accords, and we are coalescing with those countries that want to fight against radicalism.
Ambassador, I asked you this question on Jammu and Kashmir with a particular purpose. And this purpose is about the larger propaganda and bias that happens really. India regularly has invited diplomats to Jammu and Kashmir. In fact, only recently 15 diplomats went to Jammu and Kashmir to see and witness the democracy at play, the Indian vibrant democracy in Jammu and Kashmir. But for years together, we've seen a propaganda from the Western press. We've seen propaganda from many countries in the Middle East, for instance, the Al Jazeera, report complete disinformation, complete fake news when it comes to Jammu and Kashmir. Yeah. I'm sure you've faced the same. How does one deal with propagandists like the Al Jazeera or others who do not want to go to the primary sources, who do not want to go to the real victims of terrorism, who do not want to cross-check facts, and instead continue to unleash this kind of disinformation, sometimes also at the behest of a deep state?
We cannot become tired of calling them out. Al Jazeera has really been not only doing all of the things that you mentioned, they are also promoting blood libels. Straightforward blood libels, lies, okay? And that people are believing. This is a very dangerous tactic, and that's why Al Jazeera Arabic was banned from many Arab countries, by the way. And we finally decided after many years, because, again, when people abuse your values, Israel is a very open society. But this is clearly has been abused by Al Jazeera with an agenda of promoting the Muslim Brotherhood, basically, and movements like Hamas. Okay? So we finally decided to ban them. This is a very important decision. And I believe that if we in the West want to really deal with the radicalism problem, we have to start dealing with the content that is being promulgated, not only by television, but also through social media, on satellite channels. When I lived in Jordan, it was during the Arab Spring, I had satellite TV, and I had, there were about 1,000 channels in Arabic.
Right.
About 500 channels were, religious channels. And in 90% or 95% of these channels, they were promulgating hate, anti-Semitism, anti-democratic values. So are we going to allow that? At the end of the day, democracies have to defend themselves, and we have to find ways that on the one hand, we will not renounce our freedom of speech, but on the other hand, those who are creating blood libels or calling for violence, these people have to be banned. And there's no choice. If we don't do that, we will continue suffering from this wave of radicalism. We will see more violence. I've been discussing this a lot with my European colleagues when I served in Europe. And some of the European countries actually are waking up into it. Some of them, for example, started to ban imams that are radical from coming from the certain places in the Arab world to their own countries. They've been monitoring more carefully what is the content of these institutions that are existing in their own countries. Take, for example, Germany. They have, in the last few weeks, closed some institutions that were promulgating hatred in their own country. So we have a right to defend ourselves, not only militarily, but also when it comes to the promulgation or distribution of hatred. And I really admire the capability and the persistence of the Indian government, that on the one hand has a strong hand against terrorism, but on the other hand, it is able to show the population that actually there is a way out of radicalism, that you can participate, that you can vote, that you can have a right for free enterprise, and you can have a possibility for prosperity. That's very important. And we are learning that. I hope that we will be able to do the same with our much less capability in a situation which is much greater compared to our capabilities.
Ambassador, my last question, you've been here for the last few weeks, but you will be here for the next 3 years as well. What would be the important objectives or milestones that you will have in mind over the next 3 years that history remembers, that the steps that you took, the pragmatic steps that you took, actually helped India and Israel relation move to the next level?
Well, you're right that I wanted very much to come to this country because I felt that I can make a difference for my country and for its national security. And this is why I wanted very much to come to India. But let's face it, I'm just in a learning curve now, right? There are yet a lot of things that I have to learn about this incredible civilization, about the possibilities, etc. What I can tell you in the meantime is that I already identified that there are several pillars of this relationship, as I mentioned at the beginning of our interview, and there are new opportunities. So, for example, the infrastructure issue. Why is it so important for us? Because Israel, like India, is an old civilization, but a very young country, and we are lagging behind when it comes to building our infrastructure. Mm-hmm. We, for example, don't have a metro system in Tel Aviv. We have a light train in Jerusalem, in Tel Aviv, but we lack a lot of infrastructure, and we need competition, international competition, to have good projects at a reasonable price. And I found out that Indian companies have been doing great work here. So you are still in the midst of building your infrastructure, but you already built 1,000 kilometers of metro, and we have 0. So if we can bring Indian companies to compete and win international infrastructure projects in Israel, and we are going to invest about $35 billion in only the next 5 years, then it would be great because it will save us a huge amount of money, in the billions. It will solve the issue of lack of manpower, and it will allow Indian companies to achieve international experience, which they lack now. So there is a huge interest. It can be another layer in this very substantive relationship that we have. So that's one example. Another challenge that I have is to try to streamline our innovation cooperation into places that will be the best for both countries. So I have to learn what has been the impact of the cooperation so far, what we can do together. Another thing that was already identified several weeks before the 7th of October was this issue of connectivity, of regional connectivity. And India is talking about it, trying to promote it. I think that once the war is over and we find that we have established in our region the building blocks of security cooperation that has been working now in the context of confronting the air threat that is coming from Iran and in other aspects, we have a situation in which we can build other building blocks, the political stability and the economic stability that will allow us to create this connectivity between Asia and Europe. A corridor of stability and prosperity that will include shipping, communications, energy corridors, and many other things that we can do. So this is a huge opportunity. I hope that once we achieve stability in West Asia, we'll be able to go ahead and implement it because the countries of the region are interested in that, and India is interested in that. So probably it will be up to the next US administration to decide how much energy they want to put into this project.
Well, on that note, Ambassador Reuven Azar, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks.